Today we are at the SDSU Extension Genetic Seedstock Symposium that is being held at the Regional Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And we have a number of speakers that are presenting to producers today, and one of the ones that's joining me right now is Dr. Robert Cushman. Dr. Cushman is a researcher at the USDA Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska, so thank you for joining us today. And his talk was about the genetics of reproductive traits and focusing a little bit more on the heritability of reproductive traits. So, Dr. Cushman, can you tell us some of the key points that you presented to the producers today in that topic area?
In general, reproductive traits are lowly heritable, and so the idea that we are going to develop genetic markers or really investigate overall fertility is probably questionable. However, the genes that are involved in development of the female reproductive tract are actually quite heritable, and there are genetic familial patterns of disruption in development of the female reproductive tract in women, in cattle. There's also a very high genetic heritability for age at menopause that's driven by the ovary. So I discussed some of the genetic factors involved with development of the reproductive tract. The next thing that becomes interesting is many of these are growth and development factors. So when we start using genetic markers for carcass and growth traits, which is where the industry probably will go, we need to be certain that those same markers are not then negatively impacting the fertility of the cow herd, similar to what's been observed in Holsteins and single trait selection for milk. So the point I was bringing to the producers today was this concept that while we may not need markers for fertility itself, we need to make sure the markers we are going to use do not negatively impact fertility.
So it's really important, the information that you presented to the producers today, that they understand the heritability of reproductive traits, but then also the heritability of the other traits that the industry is striving for, such as carcass traits, and just really have a good understanding of what that is. Is there, for some of the producers, is there any other kind of take-home message in regards to a short summary of how they can measure that, or what they should consider as they think about the heritability?
So one of the easiest ways to measure, at least from the fertility side that I discussed today, is reproductive tract scoring, which is manual palpation of the reproductive tract. Heifers with larger tracts usually breed earlier and stay in the herd for a longer period of time. A lot of this is associated with the number of follicles that are in the ovary, which is that driving factor toward reproductive senescence or menopause. So even if we don't go to genetic markers, having a vet do a reproductive tract score on heifers or learning to do it yourself for your own heifers is a way to evaluate some of that and make sure that you're keeping your fertility in your herd.
Well, that sounds like a great point for producers to know and understand about being able to be aware of the reproductive tract scores. Any final comments on your presentation that you want to share with the producers that were here today and maybe watching the podcast at home?
Just that they really do need to consider selection indices in making their breeding decisions, and realize that you don't want to just be breeding in one direction, whether it be fertility or carcass traits or growth traits, but that true genetic selection requires looking at the big picture and knowing what your breeding plans are.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being one of our speakers today. And for more information on the Genetic Seedstock Symposium, you can go to www.igrow.org, SDSU's extension website portal.